Let us begin with the Robin Marris model of managerial enterprise. We shall begin by understanding that in recent years, new theories of the firm have been developed under oligopoly which lay stress on the role of the managers and their behavioral patterns on the price and output decisions of the firm. It pointed out that profit maximization is not the only goal of the managers as they are trying to pursue other goals as well. Besides behavioral theory, the other theories that have developed was managerial theory of the firm. The three theories of the firm which have been developed in the recent years are managerial theories of Williamson, Marris and Baumol. Professor Baumol have propounded a theory of sales maximization in his book Business Behavior, Value and Growth. The sales maximization theory of Baumol says that managers of the firm seeks to maximize their sales revenue subject to a profit constraint. Under this, the objective of the managers is to maximize sales. When the profits of the firm reach a level which is considered satisfactory by the shareholders, then managers are free to maximize their revenue by promoting sales instead of maximizing profit. Williamson, like other managerial theory of the firm, assumes that utility maximization is the sole objective of the managers of a joint stock organization. It is also known as managerial discretion theory. Williamson emphasized that managers are motivated by their own self-interest and they tries to maximize their own utility function. According to Marris, the manager of the firm tries to maximize the rate of growth of the firms, that is the maximization of the rate of growth of demand for the products of the firm and of the growth of its capital supply rather than maximization of profits. In order to achieve this objective, the firm is facing basically two constraints. The first is the constraint set by the available managerial team and its skills, and second is the financial constraint set by the desire of the managers to achieve maximum job security. The managers, by jointly maximizing the rate of growth of the demand and the capital, maximizes their own utility as well as utility of the shareholders. The conflicting interests of owners and management coincide with the objective of balanced growth of the firm as it ensures fair return on owners' capital and faith in managers who achieve this goal. After studying this module, you shall be able to know the concept of managerial theory of firm, how Robin Marris' model is different from other managerial theories, understand why growth maximization is the goal of the managers rather than profit maximization. Let us begin by understanding the model of managerial enterprise. This model of managerial enterprise was developed by Robin Marris in 1964. Like Williamson, Marris' approach is also based on the fact that whenever the difference between ownership and control exists, then the self-interest of agent makes profits lower than in a situation where principals act as their own agents. In other words, the Marris model is also based on the fact the ownership and the control of the firm are in the hands of two different people. He, like Williamson, also assumed that the managerial utility function includes variables such as salary, status, prestige, job security, and other monetary compensation. Out of these, salary is the only quantitative variable which is measurable. On the other hand, all other variables except salary are non-quantifiable, that is, not measurable. The utility function of managers is a function of salary, monetary expenditure on the staff, and discretionary investment. Utility of managers is a function of SMID, where UM is the utility of the managers, S is monetary expenditure on the staff, M is the management slack, ID is discretionary investment. Here, the variables expenditure on staff salary, management slack, and discretionary investment is used the unquantifiable concepts like power, status, job security, dominance, etc. The variable expenditure on staff, management slack, and disinvestment can be assigned some nominal values. The goal of the managers is the maximization of their own utility. On the other hand, the goal of the owners of the firm, that is, shareholders, is to maximize profits, market share, capital, output, public image, etc. U naught is a function of P, MS, K, Y, where U naught is the utility of the owners, P is the profit, MS is the market share, K is capital, Y is output. Here, the goal of the manager is the maximization of their own utility. In contrast to Williamson, Marris argues that the difference between the goal of the managers and the goal of the shareholders is not so wide as other managerial theories claim. This is so because most of the variables appearing in both functions are strongly correlated with a single variable, that is, the size of the firm. He assumes that managers are basically concerned with rate of growth of size. There are various measures, indicators of size exist like capital, output, revenue, market share, and there is no consensus about which of these measures is the best. Marris defines size in terms of corporate capital, which is sum total of book value of fixed assets, inventory, net short-term assets including cash reserves. According to Marris, the size and the rate of growth are not necessarily equivalent from the point of view of managerial utility. If they are used interchangeably, then there would be high mobility among managers of the firm. The managers would be indifferent between being employed and promoted within the same growing firm, enjoying high salaries, power, prestige, and moving from a smaller firm to a larger firm where they would have the same earnings and status. But inward, the mobility of managers is low. Various studies have proved that managers prefer to be promoted within the same organization rather than move to a larger one where the environment might be hostile to the newcomer. Hence, managers aim at the maximization of the rate of growth rather than the absolute size of the firm. According to Marris, the goal of the firm is the maximization of the balanced rate of growth of the firm, that is, the maximization of the rate of growth of demand for the products of the firm and of the growth of its capital supply. This can be written as maximize G is equal to GD is equal to GC, where G is the balanced growth rate, GD is the growth of demand for the products of the firm, and GC is the growth of the supply of capital. Let us understand the growth of demand for the products of the firm and growth of supply of capital in detail. According to Marris, the utility function of owners can be written as U naught is a function of GC, where U naught is the utility of the owners and GC is the rate of growth of capital. On the other hand, the utility function of the managers may be written as follows. UM is a function of GDS, where UM is the utility of the managers and GD is the rate of growth of demand for the products, and S is the job security. Marris assumes the utility function of managers is a function of rate of growth of demand for the products and job security. He assumes that salaries, status, and power of managers are strongly correlated with the growth of demand for the products of the firm. Hence, managers will enjoy higher salaries and will have more prestige the faster the rate of growth of demand for the products. Marris recognizes that the drive for the rate of growth is not without constraints. Thus, in the model, there are two constraints, the managerial team constraint and the job security constraint. Let us examine these constraints in detail. Marris adopts Penrose's thesis of the existence of a definite limit on the rate of efficient managerial expansion. At any one time period, the capacity of the managerial team determines the upper limit to the growth of the firm. There is a limit to the output increased by hiring new managers because of their lack of experience and time lag involved in attaining required skill. Penrose's theory is that planning and execution of the operations of the firm are the result of teamwork, which requires the cooperation and coordination of all managers. There is a time lag when a new manager is fully ready to join the teamwork necessary for the efficient functioning of the firm. Thus, although the managerial ceiling is receding gradually, the process cannot be speeded up. Similarly, the other factors that also limits the rate of growth of the firm is research and development. Research and development implies any new ideas or innovation which affect the growth of demand for the products of the firm. The work in the research and development department is a slow process and it cannot be expanded quickly. In order to enhance research and development, you need to hire new scientists and designers, which requires time to contribute efficiently. Research and development also cannot expand output continuously. The managerial constraint and research and development capacity of the firm set limits both to the rate of growth of demand and the rate of growth of capital supply. This is natural that the managers want job security. This desire of security by managers is reflected in their preference for service contracts, generous pension schemes, and their dislike for policies which endanger their position by increasing the risk of their dismissal by the owners. The risk of dismissal of managers arises if their policies lead the firm towards financial failure, bankruptcy, or render the firm attractive to be taken over by other competitors. In the first case, the shareholders may replace the old staff in the hope that by appointing new management, the firm will be run more successfully. Whereas in the second case, if the takeover is successful, the new owners may decide to replace the old management. Marris suggested that managers would like to seek job security by adopting a cautious and prudent financial policy. The prudent financial policy would consist of a non-involvement with risky investments, b financing growth. Let us now understand each of the components. A. Non-involvement with risky investments. The managers should choose projects which guarantee a steady performance. They should not involve in ventures that are risky, that is, highly profitable if successful, but will endanger the manager's position if they fail. B. Financial growth, mainly from the profit levels being generated by the present set of products. To judge the prudence of a financial policy, Robin Marris proposed the concept of financial constraint. This financial constraint is determined by the risk attitude of the top management. The management who is a risk lover would like to prefer high value of A, while the management who is risk averse would like to prefer low value of A. Slide 30. According to Marris, the financial constraint A is the weighted average of the three security ratios, that is, the leverage or debt ratio, the liquidity ratio, and the retention ratio. First, let us understand the meaning of leverage ratio. The leverage or debt ratio is defined as the ratio of value of debt to the total assets of the firm. Leverage or debt ratio A1 is equal to value of debts over total assets. The leverage ratio measures the extent of reliance on borrowing for expansion purpose. A lower leverage ratio would retard growth, and a higher leverage ratio would invite takeover bids and increases the rate of failure. Next, moving on to the liquidity ratio. The liquidity ratio is defined as the ratio of liquid assets to the total assets of the firm. Liquidity ratio A2 is equal to liquid assets over total assets. Low liquidity ratio implies the possibility of insolvency of the firm, whereas high liquidity ratio increases the security. If the liquidity ratio is too high, then it would have an adverse effect on the rate of growth. Therefore, to ensure security, the management should choose the value of which is neither too high nor too low. In his model, Marris assumed that the firm operates in the region where there is a positive relation between liquidity and security. Moving on to the retention ratio, the retention ratio is defined as the ratio of retained profits to total profits. Retention ratio A3 is equal to retained profits over total profits. According to Marris, retained profits are the most important financial source for the growth of capital. The high level of retained profits cannot keep shareholders happy, and a too high retained profit implies that management is taking a risk of displeasing the shareholders. Now, let's look at the characteristics of financial constraints. The two characteristics of the financial constraint are: Marris assumed that the financial constraint is negatively related to A2 and positively related to A1 and A3. Marris also assumed that there is a negative relation between job security and the financial constraint. It implies that if A is increased, the job security of managers declines, and if A is decreased, the job security of managers increases. Thus, the financial constraint determines the level of job security and hence limits the rate of growth of the capital supply and also the rate of growth of the size of the firm. Next, we need to understand how the equilibrium of the firm is achieved. According to Marris, the goal of the firm is the maximization of the balanced rate of growth of the firm, that is, the maximization of the rate of growth of demand for the products of the firm and of the growth of its capital supply. This can be written as maximize G is equal to GC is equal to GD, where G is balanced growth rate, GC is growth of demand for the products of the firm, and GC is the growth of the supply of capital. Let us first discuss the growth of demand, then supply of finance, followed by their interaction. The rate of growth of demand for the products depends on the rate at which new products are tried, diversification rate, and the percentage of successful new products. GD is equal to a function of dk, where D is the diversification rate, K is the proportion of successful new products. Further, we see the forms of diversification. The two forms of diversification are: 1. Differentiated diversification, 2. Imitative diversification. Let's now understand the meaning of differentiated diversification. The firm may introduce a completely new product whose close substitutes are not available. These new products create new demand and thus compete with other products for the income of the consumer. According to Marris, this is most important form in which the firm seeks to grow. Moving on to imitative diversification, the firm may introduce a product whose close substitutes are available by existing competitors. It is almost certain to induce competitors' reactions. Given the uncertainty regarding the reactions of competitors, the firm prefers to diversify with new products. There exists a positive relationship between diversification and the rate of growth of demand. The proportion of successful new products K depends on the rate of diversification D, the advertising expenses, price of new successful products, the research and development expenditure, and on the intrinsic value of the products. K is a function of D, A, P, R, and D intrinsic value. The proportion of successful new products K is positively related to advertisement expenditure and research and development expenditure. Marris had used average profit margin M as a proxy for advertisement and research and development expenditure. The average profit margin M is negatively related to advertisement and R&D expenditure. The proportion of successful new products is also negatively related with the average profit margin. The proportion of successful new products depends on diversification as well. The rate of new products introduced in each period. If too many new products are introduced too fast, the proportion of fails increases. Thus, the rate of growth of demand GD is a function of diversification D and average profit margin M. GD is equal to F3 dm, where partial differentiation of GD with respect to D is greater than 0 and partial differentiation of GD with respect to M is less than 0. The growth rate of demand is positively correlated with the diversification rate D and negatively related with the average profit margin M. Let us now look at the rate of growth of capital supply. The rate of growth is financed from two sources, internal and external. The internal source of finance is profits. The external source of finance may be obtained by the issue of new bonds or from bank loans. Marris assumed that the main source of finance for growth is profits. This is because of two reasons: the issue of new shares as a means of obtaining funds is for prestige, and other reasons not often used by an established firm. The external source of finance is limited by the security attitude of managers, that is, from their desire to avoid mass dismissal. According to Marris, the rate of growth of capital supply is proportional to the level of profits. GC is equal to A into P, where GC is the growth rate of corporate capital, P is the net rate of profits after depreciation and tax earned on productive assets, A is the financial security coefficient. The level of total profits P depends on the average rate of profit M and on the capital output ratio O, which is the efficiency of the performance of the firm. So, P is a function of average profit rate and overall capital output ratio. P is equal to function of MO, where partial differentiation of P with respect to M is positive. The overall capital output ratio is not a simple arithmetic average of the capital output ratios of the individual products of the firm, but is a function of the diversification rate D. It can be written as O is equal to a function of D. For a given capital, the relationship between capital output ratio and diversification is up to a certain level of D is positive, reaches a maximum, and then starts falling as the number of new products increases the overall output. Output is at maximum when the D is at its optimum level, allowing the optimal use of the managerial team and the research and development personnel. Beyond the optimal point, the total output decreases with further decreases in D. Hence, the success rate for new products fall and efficiency declines. If all the security constraints on leverage, liquidity, and retention ratio are operative, the value of A becomes unique. This unique value of A then becomes a constraint in the model. This can be written as A less than equal to A star and GC is less than equal to A star into P, where A star is the value of A associated with financial policies in which all the security constraints are effective. The complete summarization of the above equations is as follows. GD is equal to a function of MD, that is demand growth equation. P is equal to a function of MD, that is profit rate equation. GC is equal to A into function of MD is equal to A into P, that is supply of capital equation. The equations for security constraint and balanced growth constraint are A less than equal to A star, that is security constraint, and GC is equal to GD, that is balanced growth equation. The firm is in equilibrium where GD is a function of MD is equal to GC, which is a function of A into function of MD is equal to AP. Here, the equilibrium equation depends upon two unknown variables M and T. The model cannot be solved unless one of the variables M or T is subjectively determined by the managers. Now, let us summarize what we have learned in this module. Like Williamson, Marris' approach is also based on the fact that whenever the difference between ownership and control exists, then the self-interest of the agents make profits lower in a situation where principals acts as their own agents. According to Marris, the goal of the firm is the maximization of the balanced rate of the firm, that is the maximization of the rate of growth of demand for the products of the firm and of the growth of its capital supply.